Hey everyone, my name is Angelyca and this is Angi. Today we are going to talk about attachment styles. So recently Angi just did a webinar on the attachment styles. Do you want to do like a brief summary of what attachment styles are?
Sure thing. Attachment styles are looking at how a child learns to relate with other human beings. And this starts early on in child's early developmental years with their primary caregiver or their parents. They really kind of pave that way to attachment styles and how they're going to attach to other human beings through their relationship with the child.
Angi actually found this really awesome website where you can take a quiz and it'll tell you what attachment styles that you have. So what were your results?
After you watch a video on the attachment styles, you have to absorb some of the information. You see that there's 4 different styles. I ended up with dismissive avoidant attachment. And let me tell you, Angelyca, that was pretty on point.
I think so. And then my results were anxious, but the other 2, so there's 4. Here is, I guess one would say, the ideal attachment.
That only like a very limited population. So let's just say the secure attachment, which we would all like to ideally achieve and attain either as adults with each other, with our spouses, relationships, and even parents as adults, or even with our own children as we're adults. But I think there's probably like...
I think it said 56% in your presentation.
56% fall into that category. And and none of these are ever permanent. This seminar, or this webinar, is to bring awareness on, take a look, check out your attachment style, take the assessment to see what kind of attachment style you are, and see if you want to modify it a little bit.
For sure. So, like I said, the 4 attachments are secure. I guess that's an ideal or probably most healthy attachment style. And then there is avoidant, and then ambivalent, anxious, that you say it right? And then the last one is disorganized, but like you mentioned, you had dismissive avoidant, so there is still like some intersections. So if you feel like you connect with like various parts of like different attachment styles, then you may have like one that kind of falls in both or different categories.
And Angelyca, you bring up a good point because, like you said, mine's dismissive avoidant, and you can see there's some intersectionality between, different categories. And I would say that this was actually probably more my style in my 20s and 30s in relationships with the opposite sex, sometimes the same sex. But then now with my friendships, I would say I'm more secure. And then now with my husband, I would say I have a secure attachment style because I've been doing some work.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I definitely have had the dismissive avoidant, and I can lean back into that tendency when I'm being triggered, if you know what I mean.
So what are like the symptoms or like traits that you feel like you connect to with your dismissive avoidant attachment?
I would say the things that for me that really ring true. So in childhood, not to go into the whole childhood story watch our first video on our family relationships and our dynamics growing up.
Link down below.
Link down below. And I would say growing up, learning that I had to be a survivor because I grew up in poverty. My first addiction was for love and attention. There's a lot of emotional neglect from an early age. So with that being said, I learned to be a survivor. And from my attachment, from my caregivers at the time, I learned that I had to do things on my own. That I had to make myself feel secure. And so with that, if I feel that even now when I'm in situations, I do avoid emotional connection, attachment, and closeness with other people. And it's that usually, and I remember this in my 20s and 30s, I wouldn't pursue romantic relationships, and I actually did actively avoid them because I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if I would feel loved, if I'd feel abandoned, or I already had low self-worth because I was always doing things on my own. I didn't know if it would solidify my low self-worth by being with somebody. So there are times I would be dismissive of my feelings and avoidant. Even now, if you saw the video, that I had left and moved out on my own the last year from my husband to work on some things. Now we're stronger. We are actually in that secure attachment phase, but we had to work at it. We had to open and lean into our communication. And that's what I would say was the one thing that helped me with not only the impact of being dismissive and avoidant throughout my 20s, 30s, probably starting in my teen years, it says the one therapeutic or the one thing that can help you work on this type of attachment style is leaning into your authentic self and communicating what you need in a diplomatic way with either your significant other or with your friends or with your parents, caregivers, or whomever. So I would say that leaning into that communication and reminding myself that I'm not the victim at times, and I know, being that survivor, I can be triggered to be angry and dismissive and avoid things and just take off. But now I have grounded and secured myself to breathe. I do some mindfulness, some breathing, but then I want to receive the message that they're giving to me without my subjective negative self-talk diluting it.
It's so funny that what they recommend to like get better is because I feel like that's what you already kind of like preach to people, and what your mission is like to be your authentic self. So I feel like even maybe before this quiz, you were already doing what you needed to do.
Right? It was something in the universe that was calling like, okay, you need to make these changes. What about yours?
So mine was the anxious one, and while I feel like connected to some of the things or some of the aspects, I feel like it doesn't like totally represent how I had like every single relationship. So when I was growing up, my dad was an alcoholic, so I definitely like can resonate with some of like the characteristics from the anxious style. Like whenever my dad was drunk, I didn't know like what was gonna happen. Like was he gonna like explode and like start yelling and screaming for a reason, or was he just gonna be like in a silly little goofy mood? You know what I mean? You never knew what to expect, so I definitely feel like
walking on eggshells.
Yeah, walking on eggshells when I was a child, but now that I've grown up and obviously he's in recovery and I'm out of the house, like I don't feel that much. And obviously I had my mother, and I had a very much more of like a secure attachment to her. So it's kind of interesting to see like where and when I pull from like the secure attachment from what I learned from having my mom, and then what I have from the anxious of like living with my dad. My partner and I have been together in November. We'll be together for 4 years.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. And I feel like a lot of our relationship is secure, but then there are points in the relationship when this is all on me. It's like I have like codependency issues from like my dad growing up. So sometimes I feel myself like pulling from like this, like the anxious characteristics, even though there's like nothing going on. Like it just seems like it's in my head. Yeah. Even though like my partner's like not doing anything, he's literally just like existing. So I think it's interesting that like I can relate to some characteristics, but not to all of them.
That's such a great point. And in different relationships too.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting how like you said, my dismissive and avoidant, it says I'm really good at putting up boundaries, and I am like great at putting up boundaries.
For
and
sure.
Y'all know that if you're working on community coalitions with me, I'm like, nope, I can't take on another board.
Not today.
not today. And so in speaking to that, like my friends, I feel like I'm more my authentic self. If in a love relationship, I feel more vulnerable and more susceptible to judgment or criticisms or pain. Leaving me or, assuming something. And so that I feel being triggered or easily triggered. My husband and I just talked about this yesterday. He's like, sometimes, he's like very delicate with his approach. You may take this way. And he's like, I've noticed that when you're really stressed or when you have a lot of things on your calendar, you're more irritable. Yeah. And you're more quick to trigger and, maybe project a little some things on me that I'm doing. And we had a very organic conversation and it was very insightful because I will say he's learned on his end how to communicate with me to keep me open and receiving is his tone of voice and to come at me with a respectful tone. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, you're right. And then I started thinking about it. And this is the whole point. It's like once you notice or understand or at least get a glimpse of some of your characteristics or personality traits in some of these different attachment styles, they're not all inclusive and they're not all generalized across the board. So yeah, this is predominantly my dismissive avoidant attachment in my 20s and 30s. I was promiscuous. I was avoiding relationships but pulling at the same time. I know if I broke up with some people in college, up until then I wouldn't appreciate them until they're gone. So I was like scrambling to get them back. So it's like, ooh, no, I do want you here, but I'm scared of you being here. So I'd push and pull, I'd dismiss or I'd avoid, all those plethora of mind tripping situations, so to speak. But now I can look at and own where I might be, diluting a situation with a subjective negative thought coming from my childhood. So there's still things lingering there, but now instead of me immediately being triggered and me going boom, I can be reflective.
Yeah.
And think about, like, does this situation warrant this emotional response?
Yeah, and I think this reminds me of, like, recovery is not linear. Like, there's sometimes you have, like, bad days or stuff, so even though, like, your relationships can be more secure now, like, if you're not doing well or you have a lot going on, you can fall back into, like, the natural state of, like, your relationships being dismissive and avoidant because of your childhood. But, like, when you are better, then you kind of, like, go back to the secure moments.
Excellent way to wrap that up. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like, I lean into, some of the things that I'm in recovery for: alcoholism, bulimia, and even some mind, like anxiety, things along those lines. It's all intersects. And so I know when I have, those stressful moments in life, not only those things I can lean into, but these personality characteristics. And you wrapped that up so well that it's when we have awareness of these things that we could fall back into.
Yeah.
It's easier to recognize them before they start to full-blown happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope the summary of what we have experienced in not only our childhoods with the attachment style that we learned through the caregivers that we had in our environments. Beautiful thing about that is that they can be unlearned, negative or positive attachment styles that we've developed. And so just like, being on a recovery path from addiction, it's not linear. You learn as you go, and you discard things that don't fit your survival anymore, and you no longer are white-knuckling life. So we want to move over from just surviving to thriving. So when you take the quiz at the end of this, it's not any psychological evidence-based, it's for fun, but it's just to give you some awareness, like, oh, that does sound like me in my friendships, or I could see this happening in my relationships with loved ones, significant others, or, oh, I saw this as a child with my own attachment style with my parents, or I see this with my own children, the attachment style that either I'm replicating or I'm doing differently. So it's just good conversation, and it's, again, awareness is a start to any kind of behavior change. So if you're seeing something that you're recognizing that isn't healthy for you, it's maladaptive, keeping you from being able to speak your truth, do some investigation and do some modification through your awareness.
So if you're interested, we'll have the link to the quiz down below. And this is not any alternative to any mental health treatment. I think it's just kind of a good idea to maybe start somewhere, or maybe if you need a topic to bring up in therapy. This is always a good starter to talk about, like, how you see your relationships or what is going on in them. But thank you so much for watching, and if you're interested in seeing more videos from the McLean County ROSC, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and don't forget to go take that quiz. Maybe leave your results in the comment section so we can discuss together. Thank you.
Thank you.